Let's talk about safe words. For a sexual interaction to be consensual, it needs to be the case that everyone involved is both freely choosing to enter into it and that everyone has the ability to exit or stop that sexual interaction at any time. It's not enough for people to be free from coercion or pressure when starting a sexual encounter, although that is absolutely essential. There also needs to be a way to exit or end it. Otherwise, it's not actually an ongoing affirmative choice to be part of that sexual interaction. You aren't choosing to be there if there's no way for you to do otherwise. For good, ethical sexual interactions, we need to have tools to cleanly and concisely exit or stop a sexual interaction at any time for any reason. Kukla argues that safe words are crucially important discursive tools for exactly this reason. So let's start off with, what are safe words? I think the most well-known form of using a safe word is to choose just a random word. So sometimes people choose avocado. Kukla talks about folks who use the term Helsinki. Right, so the idea is that it's supposed to be a somewhat random word that, importantly, would not typically be used during a sexual interaction. So, yes is a terrible safe word, because that's something that might be said, more casually during a sexual encounter. So it's something that shouldn't typically be said during a sexual interaction, so that when somebody does say it, it'll be really noteworthy. People will be able to pay attention to what is going on when they say that word. Within the context of a sexual interaction, a safe word isn't being used with its standard meaning or force. So if somebody's safe word is apple, if they're hooking up with someone and then they say the word apple, they're not randomly talking about fruit right now. Nor are they, voicing an item to add to their grocery shopping list. If they say the word apple, it has particular significance, and that significance is things need to stop right now. Right? So safe words are a way to cleanly and neatly stop or exit the sexual interaction. Using a random word is one system of a safe word, but it's not the only one. It's also not obvious it's the best one. Another safe word system is the stoplight method, where people use the words red, yellow, and green. Unsurprisingly, green signals cool, thumbs up, things are good. Yellow signals something like caution. It might mean I'm still doing well, but I'm starting to get tired, so let's, pay attention to how things are going. It might mean I'm enjoying this, but we're starting to get closer to my limits, so, heads up and again, pay attention. And then red, once again, shocking, means stop. Stop right now. So one of the reasons people especially, like and find value in the stoplight system is because of how much expressive force it has, because of the ways that it communicates so many different things. Rather than just stop, that being it, it allows for a way to signal or convey yes, or careful, or nope, stop. Right? So it's got a lot more flexibility, and also it just can communicate more content. And so it often works particularly well. A third safe word method is to use what sometimes is called the drop system or the drop method. Not everybody uses spoken language, and within the context of sexual encounters, sometimes there are material features of the encounter that might prevent someone from being able to say something out loud. Say if they are gagged or bound in such a way that they can't speak out loud. So a nonverbal safe word system can be for the person who either doesn't use spoken speech, or for a person who is gagged, for example, to have an object in their hand. And if they need things to stop, they drop the object. What's useful about this, rather than say picking up something if you need it to stop, is that it's really, really easy to drop something when things are intense, but it's a lot harder to think through how to pick something up when things are intense. And that's what's crucial about all of these various safe word methods, is that the whole point of a safe word is that it is something that a person who needs it can think through and use really, really easily. If, for example, you are in a sexual encounter and things start to, get intense, or maybe there's a particular sensation that you're like, nope, I am not enjoying this one, or maybe you're right at your boundaries or your limits, right? So it is time to use the safe word. That's a lot. That's a lot that's going on. And the last thing anyone wants or needs is to have to rack your memory in your brain of like, what the fuck was my safe word? So this is why it's really, really useful and important to, first of all, have an established safe word that is the same one that you and your partner or partners are using routinely. It's not like a internet password that you want to switch up all the time. It's something you can think of easily right off the bat. When you need it, it is ready to hand. This is also why the stoplight method is particularly well suited to being a safe word, because the stoplight method is something that many of us grew up using. Red to indicate stop, yellow to indicate caution, and green to indicate go, right? And so these are really, really familiar, and they will be easy to recall, which is important because if you need to use the red or the yellow, you want to be able to think of them easily and immediately. Whew, okay. So, safe words, once again, are a way to cleanly and concisely stop or exit a sexual interaction. Without safe words, the only way we really have to stop a sexual encounter is by saying the words, no, stop. Obviously, it is important that we have that particular tool, and it should be listened to. But it's not great if that is our only means to end things. It's not great for two reasons. First, no, stop generally signals that a violation of consent is happening or is maybe about to happen. But of course, consent violations aren't the only reason to pause or end a sexual interaction. There can be a lot of other kinds of reasons why somebody just needs something to either pause or stop. And second, when people use non-literal speech in sexual encounters, which is really common, there can be instances where no doesn't have its standard meaning. And I'll come back to this point in the video on safe words and dirty talk. Okay. Let's focus in on that first point for now. The words no, stop, or some formulation that has basically the same set of words, same meaning, that generally signals that a violation of consent is happening or is about to happen. Now, when there are violations of consent, of course, it's incredibly important that we have a way to end things, and it properly should be listened to. But sometimes we need to stop a sexual interaction for completely different sorts of reasons. You might want to stop a sexual interaction because your leg is asleep and you need to get up and get the circulation back into your leg. You might say, oh, fuck, I forgot that I have an appointment in 15 minutes. I have to run, bye, right? So no violation of consent, things were going great. You just remembered something on your schedule. You might need to stop a sexual interaction because you have to pee. So things are great, hold on, I will be right back, you're gonna go pee, and then you are back into it, right? Or it might be that, maybe you thought that you'd be really into this particular kind of sexual activity or scene, but now that you're trying it, it is just not turning you on, right? Again, not a violation of consent. It just turns out it is not your jam. And so you might want to pause things for a moment and say can we switch gears to something else, right? So there are lots and lots of reasons why it can be incredibly useful and important to have ways to pause or end a sexual interaction. Safe words give a way to cleanly and concisely stop that sexual interaction. Crucially, safe words don't imply that someone's consent is being violated, right? So it doesn't imply that anyone has done anything wrong. And that lack of residue is really important. So if we generally understand statements like stop or stop no more to mean that someone's consent is being violated, then that functions to massively raise the stakes for saying no, stop. It signals that the other person has done something significantly morally wrong. And if they're violating somebody's consent, then that's very accurate. But it also means that folks are way more likely to hesitate or to maybe start to second guess themselves about whether what's happening is really that big of a deal, whether it's really sufficient to warrant implying that kind of moral wrongdoing. To be clear, it is. But in the moment, and especially if this sexual interaction is with someone you know, and especially if you care about them, then it can feel really daunting. And it can feel like such a big deal to imply that there's that kind of moral wrongdoing going on. And so a person might instead decide to stay silent. And because of the way that statements like, no, stop, tend to imply that form of significant moral wrongdoing, it also makes it more difficult to say stop for those other kinds of reasons, right? So reasons like you need to pee or your leg's asleep. Because even if you're saying stop because your leg's asleep or because you need to switch positions, the person who's hearing that no, stop might really worry that they've done something incredibly importantly wrong. And that's actually a good and conscientious response, right? We should care about not violating somebody's consent, right? Like that is something we should care about. However, it causes a problem when you know that another person hearing no, stop means that they're going to really, really panic that they've done something significantly morally wrong. And that if they hear that, yes, things will stop, but you're probably also then going to have to spend a while reassuring them and comforting them and being like, no, things really were okay. I promise it was just that my leg was asleep. You're totally fine. You didn't do anything wrong. We are good. And that kind of reassurance, that can be a lot sometimes. And sometimes it might just be easier to just keep going even if your leg is asleep. So safe words give a tool to cleanly stop that sexual encounter without that kind of implication or residue that somebody has done something wrong. It's just a way of signaling, stop. The fact that safe words are clear and concise is also really important. So instead of using a safe word, you could conceivably say, I need you to stop because my leg is asleep and I need to get up and get the circulation back, but don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong. You have not violated my consent. This is well within my sexual boundaries. Do not panic, although I do need us to stop for a moment so I can get that circulation back. You could say that, and it might accomplish roughly the same thing, but it is long and it is cumbersome and it is not particularly well suited to saying in the midst of physical activity, right? So the fact that that whole long statement is not concise makes it a far less useful tool. Whereas safe words, because it's just a word or just a simple movement, dropping something, the fact that it's really easy and quick is part of what makes it so useful. Now, before we keep going, let's pause for a moment and think about the understanding of sexual interactions that is at play when we think that the only reason to stop a sexual encounter is because there's been a violation of consent. Now, if the only reason that we think is sort of sufficient to stop a sexual interaction is if someone has done something egregiously wrong, well, that sure implies a kind of entitlement to sex. That there needs to be a really strong reason to stop the sexual interaction, because otherwise that would be, just depriving the other person of something to which they are rightfully entitled. Yikes. That is not a great way of viewing sexual interactions. And once again, it is going, pretty strongly back to that commodity model of sex. But if we recognize that people can safe word out for any reason, at any time, that alters the dynamics of the sexual interaction. There's not the same kind of bar to clear before using a safe word. You don't need to have a good enough reason. Instead, safe words are a tool that everyone can use. And that signals a very different kind of entitlement structure within the sexual interaction. If anyone can safe word out, then that means that everyone has the power to exit or end the sexual interaction. It means that everyone's well-being is recognized as important. Crucially, it also means that this is setting up conditions under which we can have genuinely consensual sexual interactions, because there is the possibility of ending or exiting the sexual encounter. Without that ability to exit, it's not clear that the sexual interactions can be consensual. Notice how safe words are relevant to all sexual interactions and sexual activities. Sort of vanilla or mainstream audiences sometimes think of safe words as something that is only relevant or only needs to be used within BDSM or certain kinds of kink. That's not a great view. Rather, safe words are relevant to all different forms of sexual interactions or activities. If it involves more than one person, safe words are relevant. Safe words provide a tool for ending or exiting a sexual interaction or encounter. Notice how that creates the conditions for actual meaningful consent within that sexual interaction. If there's no way to end or exit it, then there's not really a choice when people are continuing to interact in that sexual experience. If there is a way to cleanly and neatly end the sexual experience, it enables consensual sexual encounters. So safe words are this crucially important discursive tool for ethical sexual interactions. Further, safe words serve as a way for people to actually explore different kinds of fantasies or desires, which might otherwise be nearly impossible to explore. So having a safe word allows for experimenting or trying out new things. You don't always know if you're going to enjoy a particular kind of sexual activity. Sometimes you might be like, I think I'm into animal role play, but let's find out. But you might not be willing to do that. It might be genuinely too risky to do that if there isn't a way to cleanly and concisely end the experience if it turns out it's something that you are not into. Right? So safe words allow for figuring out what sorts of activities or desires you might find satisfying or enjoyable. Safe words also allow for exploring boundaries. So, things like edge play, where part of the fun is in finding out how much of a particular kind of sensation you can take. And so the whole point is that you can't set distinct, clear-cut boundaries ahead of time, right? So you need to be able to, when you come up against, right before you get to that boundary, there needs to be a way to clearly and immediately communicate that, you're reaching that boundary, stop right now, right? So safe words allow for people to actually, again, explore their desires. And that's so fundamentally important if we think that sexual agency matters. Finally, safe words are a way to enable ongoing check-ins and communication. This goes back to that stoplight system. This is one of the big reasons why people especially recommend and support the stoplight system. It's because it allows for a clean, concise way to communicate, doing well, caution, or nope, we need to stop right now. It allows for this immediate, in-the-moment kind of check-ins. It allows for an ongoing communication without necessarily having to stop or interrupt the sexual scene or activity or fantasy or role play or whatever it is that folks are engaged in. So safe words are, once again, this really important tool within ethical sexual interactions. I do, however, want to note that safe words aren't magically transformative. It can still be awkward or daunting to use a safe word, just as it can be awkward or daunting to stop sexual interactions that take place without safe words. If you've been told over and over and over that the only way or reason to stop a sexual encounter is if there's been a violation of consent, then it's going to take a bunch of work and practice to get out of that mindset and to instead see safe words as they are. Even with safe words, of course it's the case that things can and do go wrong within the sexual interaction, sometimes in significant ways. But what's especially useful about safe words is that they provide a tool that we otherwise just don't have, and a tool that fundamentally recognizes the personhood and agency of all the participants in the sexual interaction.